Hi, I'm Michelle Zuby, and I am here today with Dr. Bobby Newman for a little walkie talk, as we like to say over here in the New York area. So, Bobby, you were gracious enough to be a contributor and talk about inclusivity in our text. I've had the pleasure of having a variety of conversations with you over the past year, and I feel like your insight is always amazing and invaluable. So if you can just give us a little insight into your chapter, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Okay. Well, basically, when I was approached about the chapter, it hit a topic sort of near and dear to my heart, which is community work. So often, when we are talking about services with people with developmental disabilities, we talk about programs and we talk about things that are not just everyday life. And everyday life is really what we should be shooting for before all said and done, because that's really what we're trying to do, is to help people to live as fulfilling a life as humanly possible. And for many people, that does include the faith-based communities. And again, as I kind of highlighted in my chapter, there's that strange paradox where you think, okay, if there's anywhere that people should be accepted for who they are, and just you would think would be the epitome of inclusion, the epitome of welcoming, you would think it would be the faith-based communities. And in fact, that is often not the case. And sometimes for very practical reasons, faith-based communities are also corporate entities and do have various pressures regarding liabilities and other kinds of issues. But on the other hand, they really are meant to serve a function which should have welcoming and full participation as kind of a given. And yet that's not always the case. So in my chapter, I really wanted to examine that and look at some examples of probably where things have been done well and maybe where things could have been done a little better.
You know, one of the things, whenever these different topics come up, I always try to find a way to relate it to my own life, something that I can internalize and process and understand. And this might seem like a kind of silly example, but so I have a lot of food allergies and dietary restrictions and whatnot. And so it got me thinking a little bit about when people invite me to dinner, you know, whether it's at their house or we go out to dinner. And I have some friends who are really, you know, they really make a concerted effort to check out a menu before they make a reservation somewhere so that I have options or things that can be modified. And then there's other people who are like, oh, well, there's a salad on the menu, you know, and I'm like, oh, I didn't really want to come out to have a salad, you know, a crummy salad at that. But it made me think about, you know, it's not, so like with that dinner example, right? It's not just about having a seat at the table. It's about how can you have that seat at the table and participate and contribute and be validated in that setting, you know, in that community. And again, kind of a ridiculous analogy, I guess, but it hit home for me. And I think that's what we often see, right? You can come to the church or you can come to this place of worship, and sit in the quiet room. And, you know, be as noisy as you want in there, but you're not really actively participating. And I think, you know, the example that you gave with the individual that you were helping, how they were able to participate and, you know, be involved in an activity, you know, so if there's things like people that, you know, that are going on, say within a religious community, they're doing a clothing drive, you know, have somebody come and help sort the clothes if that's in their repertoire. I don't think it's just about, like I said, just having that seat at the table and just having the person show up, but what are the ways that we can really have them engage with the other members of the community. What do you think as practitioners we can do? You hit on programming and how, you know, we're so hyper focused on programming, but what are some ways that you've seen this translate into actual application?
Well, as my father was the king of cliches, everyone knew what he was going to say before he said it, and I'm afraid I'm turning into my father. I have my cliche for the situation, which is, let's not forget what brought us to the dance. We are behavior analysts, and we are very good at setting up programming, and we are very good at helping to manage and function and analyze behavior. And sometimes there are things that are interfering with the person being able to easily, fully participate, whether it be, say, difficulty with crowds and noises, and we have to do desensitization programs to help people to get used to that kind of thing, and then they can participate very happily. Or again, we can figure and look at whatever difficulty someone may be having and create functional analysis and behavior support programs to help them to participate to the greatest extent of their desire. But then there's also the flip side that you mentioned, which, again, one of my favorite stories that I talk about, and I guess I included it in the chapter, is when I was helping to put together Passover packages with a young man with a developmental disability. For those who aren't familiar with it, at Passover, there's the ritualized meal, reading from the script commemorating the Exodus from Egypt. And there's foods that are eaten in particular order in keeping with the story and in keeping with the audience participation, as I always call it. And there are people who can't afford to have all of these meals and what have you. So again, I want to emphasize the fact that this happened when I was about 17. So this was long before, I became the dark overlord of ABA. I was just a teenage kid trying to figure out what, I would do with my life. And I was helping at the temple put together these packages with this young man who had a developmental disability. And as fate would have it, I mean, he loved to participate at temple. In the afternoon, there were the afternoon prayers, and forgive me, extra detail here. In this particular sect of Judaism, you had to have 10, men at the time together to pray. It's called a Minion. And he would often make up a 10th person. And he loved to be there. He loved to participate. There were learning sessions beforehand. People would read from Torah or from Talmud and discuss and, analyze the various lessons. And I'm not going to lie about it. This was not something that he was able to participate in very fully, let's say. But putting together the Passover packages, man, he was in his element. There was nothing that was, beyond him, above him. There wasn't complex language to get him confused. There weren't nuances of meanings of words that were tricky for him. This was something he could absolutely do. And again, as the story unfolds, he could do it so well that he got so enthusiastic about it that he kind of dropped one of his boxes with too much authority on the hand truck, and some of the jars inside kind of shattered and a big mess coming through the cardboard. And as I always describe this, because it was one of those things that kind of just stuck with me, you could see the thought bubble above his head. It was like a cartoon, and the lips were quivering, and he was starting to cry, and you could tell that he was just thinking, they're going to be mad at me. They're not going to let me participate anymore. They're not going to let me come anymore. And it was just, he was shaking, this young adult, having this reaction. And again, I always joke about this. There used to be a stand-up comedian, Buddy Hackett, who a lot of ethnic humor here, and he would make jokes about what our people would do. And he said he would look back on the 5,000 years of lore and knowledge, and you expected him to come up with something very sage, and then he would say something very crude. That was the humor there. But I kind of pulled a Buddy Hackett here, and I looked back at the 5,000 years of lore and knowledge of our people, and I took my box and I chucked it down on top of his with enough authority to break my box. And I was like, oh, sorry, dude, I broke your box. It's like, bugger that. I mean, there's no way this kid is going to be crying and, kid, he was a young adult, feeling so busted up about this. And, no, screw that. I mean, Maimonides probably never said screw that, but that's what was running through my head at the time. And he was very charitable, as I always joke about this. He turned to me and he said, "You didn't break it, it broke." I was like, cool, yeah, neither one of us is at fault, but from now on, you and I, let's both be much more careful. And he knew there was never a more careful person than he was from that point forward. Good, fine, great. So he doesn't participate fully in all of the discussions of Torah and Talmud. Who gives a flying handshake? He was able to enjoy and participate and give back and really feel that sense of belonging and doing. My friend Amy Gravino, you probably know, she talks about different levels of this kind of thing, where has the person been just invited to the dance, or have they also been asked to dance once they're there? Again, forgive me, I'm thinking of a Simpsons episode from 100 years ago when you mentioned the food allergies. How long has that show been on the air? I can't even imagine. I remember back in the old days of the Tracy Ullman show when they first used to show the very crude clips before it became its own show. But there was one, I guess it was when Lisa became a vegetarian, and she pointed out to the lunch lady that there was supposed to be a vegetarian option. And the lunch lady then took the hot dog out of the bun and said, okay, here, it's full of bunalicious goodness, or whatever the line was. It was something like that. Really not a good substitute, huh? You know, you get the bun. And I think about it that way also. If someone, you know, again, I want to look at this from both ends of ourselves as behavior analysts. One, we can absolutely look at this from a functional analysis perspective, from a behavior management perspective, and help the person to participate by helping to remove those barriers that may be interfering. But the flip side of that also is sitting down in church or temple or the mosque or whatever, and standing up and sitting down on cue and reciting the words on cue and doing the whole shtick. That isn't the key to the whole thing, as far as I can tell. My own town of Long Beach, we have a very interesting thing. Unfortunately, Jackie Mason just died this week as we're filming this. Trust me, that'll be relevant in a moment. What a lot of people don't know is that Jackie Mason was actually an ordained rabbi. And he jokes about the fact that he had a congregation that before all was said and done was more Gentile than Jew, because the non-Jews were coming to hear the stand-up comedy routines that he was doing while he was a rabbi. In my town, we have a very similar kind of situation. They do mass on the beach in the summer in Long Beach, and we have a very charismatic and very intelligent priest who runs these. I mean, it must have been like what the Sermon on the Mount was like, all these people sitting on the beach and listening. I mean, granted, we have a sound system and keyboards and guitars and things like that, so they probably didn't have that at the Sermon on the Mount. But this beautiful service on the beach with, again, the homilies that Father Brian, the person who does most of these, I'm always interested as I listen, because I'm never sure where he's going to go with this. I remember one homily that started with him talking about a Simon and Garfunkel concert, and I'm like, okay, where's he going with this one? What lesson is he pulling in? But he manages to pull in real wonderful life lessons from everywhere. And before all said and done, we joke about this, but I'm sure the congregation that comes to the Mass on the beach, probably only 3/4 of it is actually Catholic. But people just come to listen to the stories and to absorb the wisdom and to discuss the ethical dilemmas and just the sense of community and everything else. I guarantee you, watching people there, a lot of these people never go to church in general. They don't know the routines. They don't know the responsive things you're supposed to say. Who cares? Honestly, that's not the key to the whole thing, that you know when to stand up, sit down, get on your knees, and what you're supposed to say in response. Follow along anyway to the best of your knowledge and absorb what's going on and just be there in community. And again, I try to think of it from that aspect also. I don't have to participate in all ends of things that may not be for me, either because I have some difficulty with the language or because quite frankly, it just, you know, that part of things doesn't resonate with me. That's fine. There's plenty of other ways I can participate, plenty of other things I can do. And lots of people come to the Mass on the beach and then get involved in some of the community outreach, working the food pantry, donating food to the food pantries, collecting food for the food pantries. When the hurricanes happened in Texas, the church that sponsors this Mass on the beach was the most bustling thing you ever saw in your life. Within days, we had collected $30,000 worth of food, diapers, gift cards, all kinds of things. The church was wide open. The rectory and every other thing just became a mobile drop-off point and sorting point. We had trucks coming in and out, just getting stuff and delivering it to the hurricane victims, you know, in Texas at the time and in Louisiana. Yeah. That's what it's all about. That's really what we're supposed to be doing, and anybody could participate in that. And lots of people were coming in, and you know, again, that's where I really come at this. Is I would love everybody to be able to participate to the greatest extent that they would like to, and in the portion of activities that really resonates with them. Maybe it's volunteering at the food pantry, maybe it's working some of these kind of events. It doesn't have to be participating in the, you know, up, down, speak on cue, unless they want to, in which case we can work on that too. Whether it be, learning the actual prayers or learning the responsive statements and when and how to get up and down on cue and what have you, or not. But I hate to think of anybody not being able to participate simply because nobody could think outside the box and say, okay, how do we address this? And in the chapter, I talk about a time when a family was banned from coming to church, and I'm talking about gun-toting deputies enforcing this court order because of the difficulties that had been created. And again, forgive me, let me go back to The Simpsons. There was the episode where they showed how Ned Flanders became Ned Flanders, and they show you his beatnik parents who didn't believe in saying no and didn't believe in structure. And finally, at some point, Ned Flanders' mother yells at the psychiatrist, "You gotta help us, man. We tried nothing and we're out of ideas." And I so often feel like I've stepped into that situation. People say to me, "We've tried nothing and we're out of ideas." Okay, let's see what we can try. But again, it requires that big picture thinking. What are we actually trying to accomplish, and what obstacles, if any, are in the way? Are there behaviors that are interfering? Are there skills that haven't been developed? That's what behavior analysts do, man. We help people to manage behavior, and we teach skills that aren't there. Don't forget what brought you to the dance, to go back to my father as king of cliches.
So much of what you just talked about, for me, like, it resonates with having compassion, right? Compassionate care. And that's a hot topic right now in our field, right? Having compassion for our clients, for ourselves, and even throwing a little act in there and looking at your values. What are your values as a clinician, and helping your clients and being in service of those values and of those people that you work with? And what is the client value? For the individual that you were helping with the Passover boxes, maybe there was a huge value there for him, and maybe there wasn't. It sounds like there was, but assessing those things along the way too, if our clients are able to verbalize that, or giving them a choice. It may not be this huge dialogue that we have with them, depending on their abilities, but if we can give them options and they're doing, able to engage in an activity that's preferred, like you said, maybe the up, down, kneeling, singing, this, that, and the other isn't really their jam, but they have other ways that they want to participate, and providing those options, I think is huge. And it resonates so much with everything that, like, as a field we're talking about now. It's not just about, touch green, which one's the fish. It's allowing people to contact more meaning in their lives and being more, part of communities and contacting what they value. And not just assuming that they don't value something because they can't verbalize what they value. I think that's another thing that we need to be cognizant of, because we're so quick to make decisions for others. And I love all the Simpsons references, by the way, because I too remember when they were just on Tracy Ullman, to date myself very much.
I'm afraid that's the extent of my cultural reference. I am such a culturally illiterate. I haven't been to the movies in probably 15 years, and I watch very little TV. So I'm afraid all of my cultural references are woefully getting outdated. But as long as we got some Simpsons fans out there, we're okay.
Well, it's a good throwback for some people, and for the younger generations, they can always YouTube it. So that's there as a reference for them as well. Well, thank you so much, not just for your contribution to the textbook, but just for all the work that you do and always being available, to be a part of whatever crazy project we have going on, and just for being a voice of reason, I think, for behavior analysts out there. Like I said before, your perspective is always spot on, and your references are always great, whether they're Simpsons or musical. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.